Hello everybody, this is Gemini Jets 1975 coming at you with a new series. I will be doing basically a brief history on an airline through route maps. And before I get started, I have a very special guest with me today. Say hello, Gemini Jets 77.
Hello.
Alright everybody, he will be joining me for the inaugural episode of a brief history in route maps. So let's do Delta, of course. Big surprise. The first one,
Shocked.
yeah, very shocked. First one is March 1973. So if you know anything about the history of Delta, you know that, of course, Atlanta was the main hub, always has been. Memphis was also kind of, I don't remember if it was actually considered a hub.
Yeah, it was just for Northwest, and then they cut it after a year or so. I'm pretty sure.
Well, it was actually a hub in the in the 70s and early 80s also. In fact, I have a few maps
I
that,
know that.
yeah, it's kind of weird how things kind of came back. But Chicago was also a very major city. Detroit was too, but that's another story. But Chicago had many routes to other destinations. Of course, DFW was growing. And then up in the Northeast, after the Northeast merger, Boston was a major city and somewhat...
It's still now.
Right, and it's becoming one again. So we skip forward several years to 1982. This one here, it's a little bit hard to read, but if you can see here, Memphis is becoming more important. DFW is growing. Austin, San Antonio, Denver, Salt Lake, Tulsa, Kansas City. Chicago is also growing, oddly enough. And then Cincinnati also. Cincinnati was to become a very major hub. In fact, Cincinnati became a bigger hub than DFW ever was. And DFW was actually about a 300 daily flight hub at one time. Cincinnati actually went over that at one point. And then up here in the Northeast, things kind of scaled back a little bit, but still relatively major. And then you look down here in Florida, and of course, Florida to Atlanta and a lot of other places, became pretty major for Delta. And then right back here, the West Coast. This was before the Western merger. So, all right. Next we have 1985, just a couple years later, and this is right before the Western merger. So you have Memphis. Was a pretty and before this, again. This is before the Northwest merger. So. Cincinnati has grown considerably. DFW has grown considerably. In fact, nonstop service to Honolulu. And then international flights. We have Frankfurt from DFW and Atlanta, and then a couple of other transatlantic cities. Boston kind of had a resurgence, as well as New York City. So, and then of course everywhere and anywhere to Florida. And this, of course, 1985, just before the Western merger. All right, we got a few Delta connection maps here. Right here, there is ASA, Atlantic Southeast Airlines, hubs in Atlanta and Memphis. Comair, which was Cincinnati. The Orlando portion had not been opened yet by this time. And then Ransom in the the Northeast area. And then Rio down at DFW. Okay. Rio disappeared too. I think they went bankrupt. Alright, now we fast forward to 1992. This was a few years after the Western merger, before large-scale cutbacks which began in 93, 94. I could talk about that if you like, but of course Atlanta, huge mega hub, DFW, gigantic hub, Salt Lake City, and Cincinnati. So most of the point-to-point flights out of Chicago had been abandoned, and of course Memphis was no longer, a huge deal by this time. Now, what I was referring to a couple years after this, large-scale cutbacks occurred. Delta embarked on what was called Leadership 7.5, and what 7.5 stood for was cost per available seat mile. At the time, Southwest was kicking everybody's butt. Delta wanted to get their cost per available seat mile down to about 7.5 cents. Southwest was about 7 or a little bit under. And what that is, for those of you who do not know, it is the cost to fly one passenger 1 mile. So 7.5 cents was the goal. They got down a little bit under 8, if I remember correctly, but it caused major problems within the company. Delta, some people consider, was never the same after that. But anyway, that's for another story. This is the international route map from 1992. This was after the Pan Am Atlantic route acquisition. So, Frankfurt, Germany was a connecting hub, and Delta funneled many passengers into Frankfurt by flying nonstop service from DFW, LA, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Orlando, Washington, D.C., New York, JFK, and I believe that was it. And then, of course, you had many of the unprofitable services that Pan Am had flown. This hub would be, and then, of course, Paris to Tel Aviv. This would be greatly realigned in later years. I believe 95 or 6, the Frankfurt hub was closed, and many of these profitable cities such as Istanbul and Tel Aviv and Athens, flights were rerouted out of JFK as nonstops. So, and then somewhat Warsaw, Prague, a couple of the other Eastern European cities, and of course Moscow. Okay, enough about that. And we can do Delta connection flights. 1992 Business Express, they were very large, a huge operation out of Boston and of course New York. And then Comair, with the development of the Orlando hub, they began a hub in Orlando. Here it is here. And of course it was connected through Birmingham at this particular point. Alright, then you have SkyWest out west, no pun intended, Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. Los Angeles was still a leftover from the Western merger. Alright, next we have 1998. A lot of the cities, or some of the cities out of Salt Lake had been cut. Cincinnati was very large. Believe, because at one point DFW was the second largest hub, and then Cincinnati was number 3, and at some point Cincinnati became the number 2 hub, and then DFW began to decline. But this is the domestic map from 1998. New York, Boston, very large focuses, and of course Orlando. By this time, Delta Express had started flying, so Delta Express was not included on this map when I drew it. 1998 International. This was what I was referring to about closing the Frankfurt hub. So you have cities such as Vienna, Prague, Istanbul, Athens, Moscow, all being flown nonstop from either Atlanta or JFK. And then Sao Paulo services to South America have begun. So Oh, and then of course the Pacific, the Portland Pacific hub. I forgot to mention that there was. Okay, this one is my most recent one. This is after the Northwest merger, but after Cincinnati had been greatly downsized, and of course Memphis had been dehubbed, and Dallas-Fort Worth many years before, Salt Lake, yeah, Minneapolis, Detroit, New York, Atlanta, Orlando kind of making a resurgence, and Hawaii. This is where the biggest gains have been made international. So you have incredibly dense Latin America network, South America, Central America, and then the Africa destinations. That is no longer accurate. Athens, Istanbul, the Amsterdam, Mumbai route is no longer accurate. And then, of course, Seattle, the buildup in Seattle. And then the Pacific routes. Of course, Seattle, Honolulu, Atlanta, Tokyo. So this was about 2012 or 13, if I remember correctly. And then this is Caribbean. The dash lines are seasonal, just to kind of let you know about that. Of course, everything's got to be out of Atlanta. Alright, and then here's some Express Airlines. We have ExpressJet, formerly known as ASA, at least as far as Delta is concerned. Delta, Minneapolis, Atlanta, and then there's some stuff in Texas, a little bit in the Caribbean. Alright, and then our friend SkyWest, Salt Lake City, LA, a little bit in Seattle, Minneapolis. So, alright guys, I tried to make this as brief and painless as possible. Gemini Jet 77, did you have anything you would like to add to the video before we end it?
Yes, go subscribe to Gemini Jet 77. He's a great channel, great content. Really highly recommend it. And yeah, just subscribe to him and watch his content. You will not be angered or disappointed.
Yes, definitely go subscribe to Gemini Jets 1977. How many subscribers are you at right now?
49.
49. Everybody, please go help Gemini Jet 77 get to 50 subscribers, and then beyond that, get to 100. Yes, definitely. Skip over 50, go right to 100. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Please tell me if you like this new series. I have
a like already.
Awesome, thank you. Many other route maps. I even have a lot of international carriers. So just even a lot of defunct U.S. carriers. So, and even a few defunct international carriers. So thank you guys so much as always. And as usual, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video.